Hey guys, Matt Smith back here with you. Week 11 SEC preview this morning. It's been November, it's crunch time. We're ready to roll here. I'm going to start with a little bit in the rankings last night. Not much on the rankings themselves. Very little to complain about because it's very little of significance right now. We got the one stake in the ground last week with Oregon and Ohio State. Nothing changed there, obviously. So only my issues were a little bit more down ballot. NC State at 16, I thought that was a little high given their lack of quality wins. They kind of felt more like the spot they would be in next week should they go to Wake Forest and win and take over first place in that division and finally get a quality win there. Penn State probably should be in there somewhere. I mean, they've beaten Wisconsin, they've beaten Auburn, lost by 3 to Iowa, lost a competitive game at Ohio State. Obviously, the stupid loss to Illinois, I guess, is keeping them out. But I thought they should be in there with some other 3-loss teams, maybe Utah and a couple others. Utah, they don't have a real quality one either. They got some decent losses, losing to BYU and San Diego State. But where's their quality wins if that's what they're going to preach on? So I don't know. Weird to me. And I think Arkansas should be a little higher as well than 25, again, with a loss to number one, a 1-point loss on a 2-point conversion at a top 15 team. Big ranked win over Texas A&M last week. Beat a team last week that fell out of the top 25. So, I don't know, a little bit confusing to me with Arkansas. But again, no big deal. Top 10 is as is. Michigan State thing. I'll touch on that here on my big issue with Gary Barta's comments and how they explain their rankings. But the rankings themselves, it doesn't matter. Michigan State, if they win out, they'll win the Big Ten. So, it's fine. They both play Ohio State. I doubt both will beat the Buckeyes. So, small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. So my frustration is with the comments that they make and how they explain the rankings. If you want to build up confidence that you know what you're doing, you need to be able to communicate your results. And this doesn't take some master's degree in communication to be able to articulate what you discuss and how you came up with your rankings. So I don't see why just Gary Barta can't go into his interviews with just a list of 2 or 3 bullet points for each team. Here's where they're ranked. Here's why they're ranked where they are, and go from there. You can go down the whole ballot and find at some point hypocrisy, whether you went with head-to-head here or you went with quality wins here. It's 25 teams. It's going to happen. But you need to be at least be able to justify and not just speak in platitudes. So last night he was talking to, I guess this was either on the ESPN show or the post-show conference call with the general media. He mentioned Penn State was discussed amongst to be ranked. Like, what does that mean? Why were they not ranked compared to Arkansas, Utah, some other 3-loss teams, despite those quality wins? You can say, well, we compared them to Utah, to Arkansas. We saw Arkansas's 3 losses were all to ranked teams. Utah lost to 2 ranked teams and had a close loss at an above 500 Oregon State team. But Penn State has an unforgivable loss at home to a 4-6 Illinois team. Therefore, we didn't think they were worthy of being ranked ahead of Arkansas or Utah. Done. That's fair. You don't have to agree with that, but that's a reasonable explanation. Again, he just speaks in platitudes about, a loss to Penn State is considered a good loss. They're a good team. We discussed that. No, communicate that. It's not hard. Michigan State. He's like, well, we just thought Michigan was the better team. And he also said they discussed it last week about the Michigan State thing. Well, how did you discuss it last week when Michigan State was 8-0, had just beaten Michigan? I get it last week. Again, I'm not a super 100% head-to-head is the deciding factor on everything guy. That's not how I rank teams. But again, you can communicate why you had Michigan ahead of Michigan State. You can say, okay, well, it was a close back and forth 1-score game on the road. They bounced back and played well this week. They had a really good road win at now a top 20 Wisconsin team, while Michigan State played a comparable game at Purdue, who's ranked, I think, 1 spot below Wisconsin, and got dominated. So all in all, we think the Michigan resume is stronger and trumps the head-to-head 4-point loss in East Lansing. Fair. I would have Michigan State higher than Michigan, but that's how you articulate that rather than saying we just thought Michigan is the better, more complete team. What the hell does that mean? Frustrating. And the last one, he mentioned Oklahoma, why they're still number 8 despite being 9-0. He said they don't have any signature wins. That's BS. Ohio State is number 5 with a loss. They have no signature wins. They haven't beaten a ranked team. But the reason Oklahoma's number 8 is because they've struggled with 3-7 Nebraska, 4-5 West Virginia, 1-8 Kansas, 1-8 Tulane. And he could not articulate that. That's why Oklahoma's number 8, not just they don't have a quality win, because I said Ohio State is 3 spots ahead of them, 4 spots ahead of them, and they've beaten nobody in the top 25, and they have a loss. But they've dominated their bad teams. Oklahoma has not dominated their bad opponents, so that's why. And again, I just don't see why you can't articulate that if you're Gary Barta. It's not complicated. It's what you guys are discussing in the room, presumably. It's a 20 to 30-second explanation and be done with it. Don't just speak in platitudes. Drives me nuts that they do that. You need to build confidence that you're doing the right thing. I think it creates distrust amongst fans that there is something maybe not on the up and up going on, which I don't really buy the conspiracy theories about we got to get Ohio State in the playoff for ESPN. But it's still frustrating to hear those words come out of their mouth when this shouldn't be a complicated issue to be able to articulate to your fans, which just, again, a list of your teams, a couple bullet points, rattle them off, move on. That's all you got to do. All right, enough about that. SEC, 8 games this weekend, 6 conference games, 2 bad non-conference games. Pretty good slate this weekend. Next weekend we get into a few more of the FCS at SoCon Saturday games. A couple this week. Alabama moved theirs up a week from where it normally is. So we'll go through the list here. I'll start with Mississippi State and Auburn. That's your ESPN straight out of game day one. That's a really good game. Will Rogers going against a pretty good Auburn defense, who I think kind of got lost in the shuffle last week about how much praise we gave the A&M defense in the win over Auburn. Auburn defense played really well. It was 20-3, but A&M had a scoop and score, so that was a defensive touchdown. So Auburn really only allowed 13 points in that game from the Aggies offense. So they're playing really good football, I think. Now get a good test in Will Rogers, who might be playing as well as any quarterback in the league right now. Bo Nix, can he bounce back again after his last poor performance against Georgia State when he got benched for TJ Finley? He played really well the next week at LSU in that big landmark win there in Baton Rouge. Now coming home, can he put that all together? So the Nix factor, coupled with, again, I think Auburn's defense is better than they're probably getting credit for just because everything was all about the A&M defense last week. And also to pick a team to win in Jordan-Hare, I think they got to be clearly better than the Tigers like Georgia was. We'll see about Alabama in a couple weeks. And I just can't go there with this Bulldogs team. So I'm going to go 28-20 Auburn, pretty low-scoring game. Both defenses are pretty solid. I think Auburn gets out of there and keeps their SEC West title hopes alive. Let's see. 2 other ones early, New Mexico State, Alabama. Kind of an unusual spot for Alabama for their FCS Tin Horn game, if you get that reference from about 10 years ago with Nick Saban. Usually it seems like they go into this game coming off a pretty impressive performance, and Saban kind of wants them to screw around and not play well so we can yell at them. I think it's the reverse this week, especially for the offense, who did not play well at all against LSU. I think he wants to see them dominate, so I think they'll be more dialed in. He'll be more in tune to how they're playing, not just looking for nitpicking that he can stress in the weeks leading up to Arkansas and Auburn here as we get close to the end of the season. I think he will want to see some good, tangible results, see that offense play well, and they'll be fine. Of course, in Mexico State, a bad team, hasn't beaten an FBS team all year. So name your score. Line's about 52, 59-10, maybe something like that. Samford in Florida, your other bad non-conference game. Florida probably not going to have much of a crowd there in the swamp for a noon kick, a 4-5 team. Obviously, all the drama with Dan Mullen. Christian Robinson now taking over at defensive coordinator with Todd Grantham fired. Also, a long-time offensive line coach for Mullen, John Hevesy, is out. So just a mess in Gainesville. I don't think whether Mullen comes back or not is determined on how they play these next 3 games. I mean, if they go beat Samford, Missouri, and Florida State, it's not like, oh, well, they fixed everything. We're going to rock and roll. We're going to be a good team in 2022. I don't buy that. I think it's more about, does Mullen want to fix this? Does he want to still be at Florida? If he does, I think he survives, can reset his coaching staff and get one more good run at it in 2022. But if he is kind of sick of this stuff, sick of all the recruiting talk, because he doesn't really like it compared to Kirby Smart, we know that. If he just wants to move on, try and find an escape route, whether it's Penn State, whether maybe it's the NFL, then I think he will do that. But if he wants to stay, if he's willing to commit to fix it, I think Florida will bring him back for 22, but I don't think the results of these games really have much of an impact on that. It's more about him and his commitment to the school and the program. Samford, average FCS team, so they could screw around a bit, maybe 38-14, something like that. No issues there, no point spread yet, being an FCS game. We'll get one probably on Saturday. CBS game, Georgia-Tennessee. Just an interesting matchup, I think, not because I think Georgia will get seriously pushed, but because the quality of offense they've played this year has been so bad. They played Clemson, they played South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Missouri without Connor Bazelak. So outside of Arkansas and to some extent Auburn, their defense really just hasn't been tested, and they will be tested. They could pass it with flying colors and hold Tennessee to 10, 13 points. That wouldn't shock me at all. But because of what Tennessee can do in the passing game, if they can protect Hendon Hooker, we've seen them do very well against Alabama. We've seen them do very well against Kentucky. With that explosive passing game, that super fast tempo, this is something new for Georgia. And again, I think they'll be fine. But something Georgia hasn't seen, and I think potentially a recipe for teams like Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma could use down the road if they see Georgia in the postseason that probably has a bit more fuel than Tennessee might have, despite playing really well, I think, for the most part in year one under Josh Heupel. So kind of something to watch there. Other side of the ball, will Tennessee sell it against the run like Missouri did? If so, Stetson Bennett kind of picked them apart in the passing game last week. Or will they try to be more balanced, trust their front seven, but then maybe Georgia's ripping off your 5, 6, 7-yard runs, being in favorable down and distance a lot. And that's where Tennessee could get in trouble. So, again, I think they do land a couple blows. I think they can get to maybe 17 against this Georgia defense. But I think the Bulldogs offense still playing pretty well now under Stetson Bennett, who I think is probably going to be the guy going forward. If it's not JT Daniels this week, I don't think you do it before the SEC title game because you just don't have that much time to build up that cohesion that he lost when he went out of the lineup back in September. So, again, just watching how stressed this Georgia defense can get by this Tennessee offense. Maybe a little bit, maybe not at all, maybe a good bit. We'll see. Line's about 20. Again, I'm not picking against Georgia the rest of the year. They didn't cover last week, but only by a couple points on a 39-point line, so no big deal there. I'm thinking 41-17 Georgia, something like that. So a good game for maybe into the second quarter, but I think the Tennessee offense will hit their skids, probably make some mistakes, probably a defensive score at some point for Georgia, and this game will start to get away from the balls pretty quick, I would think. The other late afternoon game, South Carolina and Missouri. Gamecocks can get bowl eligible with a win. Missouri, if they win this, will get back to 500 and then have a pretty good shot next week at home against Florida to get bowl eligible for themselves as well. So probably the winner of this game gets to a bowl. Probably the loser of this game does not. So a lot on the line in Columbia. Quarterback situation, who the heck knows? Both starting quarterbacks could play, might still be out. Connor Bazelak missed the Missouri-Georgia game last week, so they will go with one or both Tyler Macon and Brady Cook. South Carolina, will Zeb Nolan be back? Not sure. Jason Brown played pretty well last week. Had a couple touchdown passes against Florida. I think Nolan would be the guy should he be healthy. So with all the quarterback situation being kind of messy, I guess I lean on who's got the better defense. And right now it's the Gamecocks. Played really well last week, been playing really hard all year for Shane Beamer. I think they can contain Tyler Beatty. Running game of their own is starting to come alive with Kevin Harris looking like his 2020 form with Saquandre White. And I think South Carolina, if it gets into a close game, I think they're a very confident team. I think they're going to get this done in Columbia. Missouri defense still not playing well. We saw what Vanderbilt did to them on the ground, and I think South Carolina can kind of replicate that. So decent amount of points here. I'm thinking maybe 31-27 Gamecocks, something like that. And they should have a party. We saw Arkansas do it last week when they got bowl eligible in Sam Pittman's second season. This would be even much more of a shock for South Carolina getting bowl eligible in year one for Shane Beamer. They should party. They should celebrate. Despite 80 teams going to bowls now, for South Carolina to get there with this roster in year one under Beamer, major kudos. So if they can pull this off, that would be quite an achievement. We'll see. Should be a good game. That's kind of flipped. I think Missouri opened about as a 1-2 point favorite. Now I'm seeing South Carolina as about a 1 point favorite there. So pretty much a toss-up game in the Battle of Columbia. Night window, 3 games. The big one, College game day. Texas A&M at Ole Miss, major New Year's Six implications. A&M still very much alive in the SEC West. If they win out and get an Alabama loss to either Arkansas or Auburn, they could find themselves in Atlanta for the first time. So fascinating matchup here between Matt Corral and Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby going against Mike Elko's defense that played so well, as I alluded to earlier in the Auburn talk last week with A&M winning that game 20-3. So for Ole Miss, it's about getting those chunk plays. A&M did not allow a play longer than 15 yards last week. That has been Mississippi's Ole Miss's offense for much of the year, but Matt Corral did not play well against Auburn. Did not take a lot of deep shots last week against Liberty. He's certainly banged up, but maybe they'll get some of their receivers back. They've been down Braylon Sanders, Jonathan Mingo, Dontario Drummond, who are their starting 3. They've mostly been out for the past month or so, so there's a good chance they'll get at least one or multiple of them back this week. If they do that, I think that's huge for Ole Miss, who's going to have to stretch the field, given the running game has slowed a bit in the past couple of weeks, despite having 3 really good options there in the backfield. So both quarterbacks, again, banged up. We know Corral's injury. Zach Calzada, of course, left the Auburn game with his dislocated, separated, non-throwing shoulder, came right back in. He's a tough dude, man. He's somewhat limited as a quarterback, but he's played pretty well when they needed him to play well this year. So I think this is just a fascinating matchup here. My head says Texas A&M, but my gut says one more big-time performance from Corral, who I think can still find himself getting back into the Heisman race with a big game this week. And they have Vanderbilt at home next week, but this is the last big game Matt Corral will play in front of the Vaughn Hemingway Stadium crowd. So my gut says he's got one more big performance in him. Ole Miss will get this done. knock A&M out of the SEC West title race and put themselves in a pretty good spot to maybe make a Sugar Bowl come selection time in a couple weeks. So fun one. Can't wait for that one Saturday night in Oxford. Here in Nashville, we got Kentucky and Vandy. Kentucky needs to get back on track. Over a month now since their last win. Lost 3 in a row. A turnover bug got them again last week against Tennessee. I think this is a bad matchup for Vanderbilt on offense. They've run the ball pretty well. We saw them do that against Missouri with Mike White being a mobile quarterback. Kentucky, you beat them through the air. We saw Tennessee do it. We saw Mississippi State do it. But that's just not Vanderbilt's offense right now. So I don't think this is a favorable matchup for the Doors to really compete and get this game into the second half and put some real game pressure on the Wildcats. So for Kentucky, just avoid the turnover bug, and I think they'll be able to take out some frustrations of the past couple weeks on the Commodores here. Line's about 21, no real strong lean there. I'm thinking maybe 38-16. Probably would just bet against Vandy on principle alone, but that number is not super attractive to me at all from a gambling perspective. Last one, good one in Baton Rouge, Arkansas and LSU. Crazy. 2 years ago, Arkansas went to LSU. They were 42-point underdogs. Now they go back to Baton Rouge for the first time since then, and they're a favorite. So what a complete turnaround in 2 years, both in the rise of Arkansas under Sam Pittman and the complete collapse of LSU, going from national title to looking for a coach now in just 2 years. So does LSU have any more in the tank, or did they throw it all out there last week against Alabama? We kind of saw the situation a few weeks back. They played really well against Florida, thought they were playing for their head coach's job, beat the Gators. Orgeron gets fired the next day. They go to Ole Miss a week later, and they really had nothing left, and Ole Miss popped them. So I could see a similar situation. They are back home. If there's a good crowd in Tiger Stadium at night, really supporting that team, given the way they played in Tuscaloosa last week, maybe they have some more energy. But I think Arkansas's got some confidence now, winning that game late against Mississippi State. I think they're the better team. I think Treylon Burks is the best player on the field. I think Arkansas gets this done, but it should be a good game. 27-24 Arkansas, maybe. That line's about 2.5, so certainly not a strong lean there. But again, I think it comes down to, can LSU channel that energy from last week, replicate that, or will they be just exhausted after leaving it all on the line in Tuscaloosa and not getting the result they so desperately wanted? So that should wrap up the SEC. Yep, we hit on all 8 games. National slate, pretty good lineup, I think, throughout the country. Early window, 2 big ones are Michigan, Penn State, and State College. Michigan needs this thing to stay alive in the Big Ten race. Oklahoma and Baylor. Baylor trying to bounce back after that disappointing loss last week to rival TCU. Still has a shot to climb back in the Big 12 title picture, but with the head-to-head loss to Oklahoma State, they're going to need some help, and probably another Oklahoma loss after that, after this one, even if they do get by. So good one there, and we'll see if the Sooners are back to their – actually, they played pretty well, I guess, before the bye against Texas Tech. But can they put a complete game together against a good opponent? I haven't seen that all year, and a good opportunity to do that on the road in Waco. That's your Fox big noon game. Early window, what else we got? West Virginia, Kansas State. Mountaineers probably need this one. They still got a shot to get to a bowl if they lose at 4-6. They close with Texas and Kansas. But a good opportunity to go on the road and get a big win in Manhattan. K-State playing pretty good football now, having won 3 in a row after a 3-game losing streak there. Syracuse, Louisville, decent ACC game. Orange trying to get bowl eligible there. I kind of like the Orange. We'll touch on that in best bets. UCF SMU felt like a big game at the beginning of the year. It's probably a play-in game for that number 2 spot in the AAC. Houston has surpassed both of them, so kind of just playing out the string. Still a glimmer of hope for SMU is because they still have to play Cincinnati. But for all intents and purposes, not a whole lot on the line there between the Knights and the Mustangs in Dallas. Late afternoon, a lot going on there. Purdue, Ohio State, and the Boilers slay another giant. After taking down Iowa and Michigan State earlier this year, Buckeyes remember what happened 3 years ago in West Lafayette. 49-20 Purdue over the second-ranked Buckeyes. So for those seniors who were there that night, definitely going to want a bit of revenge on the Boilermakers. But that offense is playing really well with Aiden O'Connell and David Bell. We'll see if the Buckeyes can look a little bit better. Been really bad in the red zone the past couple of weeks. That needs to get fixed for the Buckeyes. Actually thinking down the road closer to CFP time. Iowa State, Texas Tech, decent game in the Big 12 there. In Lubbock, so you give the Red Raiders a puncher's chance coming off the week off last week. Florida Rosedale, the Pig on the line in Iowa City, Minnesota, and Iowa. Both part of that 4-team cluster at the top of the Big 10 West. Winner of this game still with a good shot to get to Indianapolis. The loser is probably out. So a lot on the line there in Kinnick Stadium. Iowa has dominated the series. I believe they've won, I think it's 6 in a row now. Over the Gophers. So Floyd has been resting in Iowa City for the past 5 or 6 years. Gophers going to try and bring him back up to Minneapolis. Let's see, Maryland, Michigan State. Terps, I don't think they're very good. Michigan State needs to bounce back, though, so it may take out some frustrations there on the Terps in East Lansing. UAB Marshall, pretty good game in Conference USA. Both teams still alive in their respective divisions. Loser of that game going to have a hard time getting back to the conference championship game. That was your CUSA title game last year, won by the Blazers. ACC, Duke and Virginia Tech. VT needs that one if they have any hopes of getting to a bowl. If Justin Fuente has any hopes of saving his job, they looked bad last week against BC. They'll try and get back on track against probably the worst team in the ACC. In the Blue Devils, Boston College also trying to get bowl eligible in Atlanta against Georgia Tech in that 3:30 Eastern window. Primetime, Arizona State, Washington. Boy, that game took on some new life this week with Jimmy Lake being suspended, so the Huskies will be down their head coach. Does he even come back after that game, or will he get fired given his weird week last week with his comments about Oregon? Obviously, shoving his player, being a 4-5 disappointing team. We'll see. So some craziness out in the Pac-12. Arizona State got to have this one if they want to have any hopes of winning the Pac-12 South, but still going to need a lot of help from Utah. Air Force, Colorado State. Air Force needs that one to stay alive in the Mountain West Mountain Division title chase. Rams have kind of fallen off after a pretty good stretch there at midseason. ABC primetime game, good one, Notre Dame at Virginia. Don't know about Brennan Armstrong's status for the Cavaliers. If he can play, looked like he may have broken his ribs a couple weeks ago against BYU, so maybe limited even if he plays. But he is one heck of a quarterback, and that offense is a lot of fun if it's clicking on all cylinders. They need Armstrong healthy. Notre Dame probably going to be without Kyle Hamilton again. Don't have official word on that, but that's certainly a big loss for the Irish in the back half of that defense. Also losing Avery Davis, their most consistent, their most experienced wide receiver. He tore his ACL last week against Navy. So some key injuries on both sides. Irish win this one, finish with Georgia Tech and Stanford. Then they're in really good shape to get to 11-1. Definitely in the New Year's Six, and probably still at least a glimmer of hope to make the college football playoff. The big one in the ACC, that's your ACC network game. NC State, Wake Forest. Winner of that game will be in good control of the ACC Atlantic. Clemson, doesn't really matter to Clemson who wins that game. They just need, if Wake Forest wins, Clemson will have to beat Wake Forest, and they'll need the Deacons to lose to Boston College in the finale. If NC State wins, I believe Clemson would then need the Wolfpack to lose to both Syracuse and North Carolina because of the tiebreaker. So uphill sledding for Clemson. I don't really know which one you pull for. Maybe Wake Forest, just because you do get a chance to knock them off on your own next week. So still a glimmer of hope for the Tigers to win this league for the 7th time in a row. But most likely it will come down to Saturday night in Winston-Salem between the Wolfpack and the Deacons. Oklahoma State still in decent shape at number 10. They'll host TCU. Can they continue that momentum they built last week against Baylor, heading on the road to Stillwater? And after dark window, Washington State, Oregon's your big one in the Pac-12 against the Ducks. They don't really blow teams out. Cougars playing pretty well of late. They're rested, off a week off, so should be a good one there in Eugene. Nevada, San Diego State, big game in the Western Division side of the Mountain West. Winner of that is in good shape to get the conference title game there. And Utah State, San Jose State. The Aggies lead the Mountain West Mountain Division. If they win that game, they still only have a one-game lead over Air Force and Boise State. Do not have the tiebreaker against Boise, so they got to keep winning. But a tough test on the road in San Jose for Blake Anderson and the Aggies. I think that's it about going around the country. Best bets, 4-1 last week, 29-20-1 for the year. So 60% clip, feeling pretty good. Let's give you some winners here. I'm going to go with Boston College +2 at Georgia Tech. They're the better team, no real home field disadvantage. Road disadvantage going to Atlanta. That's not a real tough environment there. So BC, the better team, getting points, even though it's only 2. I'll take the Eagles. SMU, game we touched on earlier, -7 against UCF. Knights have been pretty bad, pretty inconsistent since losing Dylan Gabriel. SMU lost a couple in a row. I think they'll bounce back at home. I'll lay those 7 points. Rutgers +7 at Indiana. I think the Hoosiers are the worst team in the Big Ten. So despite Rutgers not playing very well since Big Ten play started, I get a touchdown against what I think is the worst team in the Big Ten. I'll take Rutgers in the 7 in Bloomington. Syracuse +3 at Louisville. Pretty even teams. Malik Cunningham got banged up for the Cardinals last week against Clemson. I like the Orange with Sean Tucker, rested Orange team off a week off, going on the road to Louisville and getting a win, getting bowl eligible there. And UAB +5 at Marshall. Again, pretty comparable teams, getting more